Well, for more, we're joined by Tom Switzer from Sydney University's United States Studies Centre. Tom, good to talk to you.
Andrew.
Is this all about political brinkmanship? As we've just heard, is it waiting for either the Republicans or the Democrats to blink?
Well, I think the game's up, Andrew. I think there will be a government shutdown 2 o'clock on the east coast of Australia. And it's a reminder of how deeply divided, polarised and some might say dysfunctional Washington has become over the last few years. And this has become a regular feature now of national political debate, these fiscal cliffhangers that go to the 11th hour. On this occasion, there will be a government shutdown. It will be the first one in 17 years.
How would you describe the Republican strategy here? The last time this happened was during the Clinton administration. Now, that largely backfired for the Republicans, didn't it?
It did indeed. In fact, throughout the course of 1995, after the Republicans won control of both houses of Congress, the first time in 40 years, the Republican star was rising and Bill Clinton was in the political cellar dweller. But that act of brinkmanship on the part of Gingrich in the House of Representatives and Bob Dole in the Senate hurt the Republicans so much so that Bill Clinton managed to rebound from the depths of political despair to win a fairly convincing election the next year. So, look, history is not kind to Republicans when they play these kind of tactics, but one has to remember why they're doing this. There's a group of Republicans in the House of Representatives, egged on by a few conservative Republicans in the Senate, who want to dramatically reduce the size and the scope of the federal government, and they feel that by defunding the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, the healthcare provisions that the President has legislated, this will mean that a key part of the government will be reduced. But the problem they have, of course, as you well know, is that the Democrats control the Senate, and of course President Obama, being a Democrat, will not sign any legislation that defunds his signature legislation.
Is it as simple to say that the United States is being held hostage by an extreme group of the Republican Party?
Well, opinions vary. That's probably the consensus view. Another school of thought says that the blame goes both ways. The President, after all, has been willing to negotiate with or talk to the Iranian President for the first time in 30 years. He met with the Israeli Prime Minister today, but he's been unwilling to negotiate with Republicans, likewise with the Senate Democrats. But I do think that the fact that many conservative commentators, such as Karl Rove, who was President Bush's senior advisor, even the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which is the most conservative editorial section in any newspaper in America, they've come down fairly hard on the House Republicans, and most notably Ted Cruz, the freshman Hispanic senator from Texas, who is playing hardball, who has his eyes on the 2016 presidential contest. So I think the general weight of opinion is against the Republicans on this, simply because they're on a losing strategy. There is no way they will prevail simply because the legislative dynamics work against them.
And this is all about what they see as profligate government spending as far as the Obama administration is concerned. At the centre of that is Obamacare. Just how unpopular is it in the United States?
Well, that's a very good point. One has to remember, and this is presumably what's fueling a lot of the angst in the Tea Party ranks, is that Obamacare, or healthcare provisions, which is an individual mandate to force Americans to buy health insurance in the road to a national health insurance scheme, it is unpopular with a lot of Americans. In fact, a broad majority are very uneasy about the changes which come into effect tomorrow. And the Republicans are banking on this unpopularity to help them in this legislative war. The problem, though, is that even most of those Americans who oppose Obamacare are also opposed to the idea of closing down the government in order to force Obama's hands. Bear in mind, this is an important point, this legislation that the President has, the healthcare legislation, is his keynote legislation. It was approved by the House of Representatives and the Senate. It was upheld by the Supreme Court, and the President did win a re-election running on this campaign. So even though the law is unpopular, the fact is the President does have a mandate, and this is why the Republican tactics are bound to backfire.
And Tom, just briefly then, what are the likely effects if we do, as you say, we'll get shut down tonight?
Yep.
But beyond that, of course, in 2 weeks' time, we have the deadline for extending the government's borrowing.
We've had 17 government shutdowns since the late 70s, believe it or not, and they only last for a couple of days, but one, and that was in 1995-96, which lasted for more than 20 days. I think if this one lasts for 20 days, that would be a problem, because, as you say, the most important item on the legislative calendar over the next fortnight or so is whether or not the American government should raise the debt ceiling so that the Americans don't default on their debt. Now, if the Americans don't reach an agreement on this issue, and let's face it, it's an open question at this stage, then that is a real problem, because that will shatter the world's confidence in the US Treasury bonds as an investment source, and that would almost certainly spark an economic downturn.
Tom Switzer from the US Study Centre. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Andrew.